You wake. The room is silent. Your phone reads 2:22 a.m. Again, this isn't the first time, maybe not even the 10th. Your heart might race slightly, or perhaps you feel an inexplicable weight in the air, as if something unseen is waiting for you to notice. The shadows in your room look different at this hour, deeper, more alive. You tell yourself it's nothing, just stress, just insomnia, just your mind playing tricks. But something keeps pulling you back to this exact moment, night after night. And tonight, you're finally asking why. Most people scroll through their phones when this happens. They drink water. They adjust their pillows. They force themselves back to sleep, back into the comfortable unconsciousness they've been trained to call normal. But you're different. You're here because some part of you knows that this awakening isn't random. It's not a malfunction. It's not a curse. It's an appointment your higher self has been trying to keep. And every time you've dismissed it, every time you've reached for distraction instead of stillness, the invitation has been extended again, more urgently, more persistently, until finally in this moment, you're ready to stop running and start listening. Because 2:22 a.m. is not like other hours. And what happens in these silent, liminal moments could change everything you think you know about sleep, about consciousness, and about who you really are. Between 1901 and 1944, a man named Edgar Cayce gave over 14,000 psychic readings while lying in a self-induced trance. Doctors called him impossible. Scientists called him a fraud, until they tested him, until they documented case after case of medical diagnoses given for people he'd never met in cities he'd never visited, describing conditions that were later confirmed by physicians who had access to the patient's actual bodies. They called him the sleeping prophet, America's most documented psychic, but his most unsettling predictions weren't about earthquakes or wars or the fall of civilizations. They were about ordinary people waking between 2 and 4 in the morning, in reading after reading, preserved now in the archives of the Association for Research and Enlightenment. Cayce spoke about these hours with a strange reverence. He called them the soul's classroom, the time when the veil between dimensions grows thin enough for messages to pass through, thin enough for your higher self to break through the noise of daily life and speak directly to the part of you that remembers why you incarnated in the first place. He warned that most people would ignore these awakenings, that they would medicate them, pathologize them, treat them as enemies of productivity and rest. But he also said that those who learned to recognize the pattern, who stopped fighting and started paying attention, would unlock access to guidance that could transform their entire life path. In one documented case from 1936, a woman came to Cayce exhausted and afraid. She had been waking at 2:18 a.m. every night for 6 months. Her doctors prescribed sleeping pills. Her family thought she was having a breakdown, but Cayce, in trance, told her something that stopped her cold. You are being prepared for service. The soul seeks alignment. Do not resist the hour of instruction. Within 3 months of following his guidance, she began having vivid, lucid dreams that revealed her life purpose. She went on to become a respected healer in her community, helping dozens of others navigate their own spiritual emergence. The exhaustion she had feared was actually initiation. The disruption she had resented was actually invitation. And it all began at the hour no one talks about, the hour when your soul has something to say, and the universe finally has your undivided attention. If you've been waking at 2:22 a.m., this is not insomnia. This is not coincidence. This is the first knock on a door you didn't even know was there. Numbers are not arbitrary. In the language of spirit, they are signatures, frequencies, keys that unlock specific dimensions of consciousness. The number 2 appears 3 times in 2:22. In numerology, 2 represents duality, balance, partnership, and the bridge between worlds. When it repeats, that energy amplifies. It becomes a portal, a mirror, a call to integration. But combined with the specific hour between 2 and 4 in the morning, something far more profound occurs. Edgar Cayce taught that your physical body operates on rhythms most people never consciously perceive. Between 2 and 4 a.m., your body reaches its lowest electrical resistance. Your muscles are at their most relaxed state. Your heart rate slows, your breathing deepens, and your pineal gland, that tiny pine cone-shaped organ at the center of your brain, enters peak melatonin production. This is not random biology. This is sacred geometry playing out in flesh. When your body reaches this state of total surrender, you become what Cayce called a biological antenna. The static of waking consciousness fades, the defenses of the ego dissolve, and suddenly the signal that has always been broadcasting can finally be received. But there's more. Cayce spoke often about the borderland, that threshold between sleep and waking where the rules of linear time no longer apply. At 2:22 a.m., you are not fully asleep, but you are no longer bound by the same electromagnetic frequencies that keep you locked into ordinary perception during daylight hours. In this state, 3 forces converge: the numerological resonance of repeating 2s, the circadian vulnerability of your nervous system, and the dimensional thinning that occurs when the collective consciousness of your hemisphere enters deep sleep, reducing the energetic noise that normally drowns out subtler frequencies. Think of it like this. During the day, you're trying to hear a whisper in a stadium full of screaming fans. At 2:22 a.m., the stadium empties, the lights dim, and suddenly that whisper becomes the only sound in the room. The question is no longer, why am I awake? The question becomes, what is trying to reach me? And once you ask that question with genuine openness, everything changes, because the universe has been waiting for you to stop resisting long enough to hear the answer. Not every 2:22 a.m. wake-up carries the same depth, and this is where most people get confused. They assume that because they're waking at the same time, it must mean the same thing. But Cayce made a crucial distinction. He taught that there are 3 layers to nocturnal awakening, and learning to identify which one you're experiencing is the first step toward true discernment. The first layer is what he called physical adjustment. Your body is processing something: stress hormones, toxins, undigested emotions that have been stored in your tissues. At this level, the awakening is your nervous system's way of recalibrating. You might wake with a racing heart, shallow breathing, or a sense of low-grade anxiety that has no clear source. This is real, this is valid, but it's not yet spiritual transmission. It's the body doing maintenance work, clearing the channel so that deeper communication can eventually occur. The second layer is energetic clearing. This happens when your chakra system, your subtle energy body, has been exposed to dense or discordant frequencies. Maybe you spent time with someone whose pain was overwhelming. Maybe you walked into a space where violence or grief had left an imprint. Maybe you consumed media that carried fear-based programming. At 2:22 a.m., when your defenses are down, your energy field begins to purge what doesn't belong to you. You might wake with specific sensations: heat in your solar plexus, tingling in your hands, pressure at your third eye. These are signs that your system is detoxifying on a vibrational level. And then there is the third layer, the soul summons. This is different. This is direct communication from your higher self, your guides, or the vast intelligence that Cayce called the creative forces. At this level, the awakening feels almost ceremonial. You might open your eyes and sense a presence, not threatening, not intrusive, but unmistakably there. You might hear a word, a phrase, or feel a knowing that drops into your consciousness fully formed, as if it had been waiting in the wings of your awareness for years. In one case preserved in the ARE archives, a man woke at 2:22 a.m. and felt compelled to write. He had no history of journaling, no interest in mysticism, but his hand moved across the page as if guided, and he filled 7 pages with instructions for healing a relationship he had thought was beyond repair. The guidance was specific, compassionate, and it worked. He later described the experience as being dictated to by a part of myself I didn't know existed. That is the soul's summons, and it doesn't arrive until you've cycled through the other 2 layers enough times to recognize the difference. So the next time you wake at 2:22 a.m., pause. Before you label it, before you medicate it, before you scroll it away, ask yourself, is my body clearing? Is my energy recalibrating? Or is my soul trying to speak? Because the answer to that question determines what you do next. While you sleep, you travel. This is not metaphor. This is not poetry. According to Edgar Cayce, every single night, your consciousness separates from your physical body and moves through dimensions most people don't remember upon waking. He called this your astral body. Some traditions call it the dream body, the etheric double, the soul's vehicle for navigating non-physical realms. And while you're out there, you're not idle. You're working, learning, reviewing. Cayce taught that during deep sleep, the astral body travels to what he called the Hall of Records, the Akashic Library, where every thought, every action, every choice ever made by every soul is stored. You review your past lives. You meet with soul family members who may or may not be incarnated on Earth at the same time. You attend lessons. You receive guidance from teachers in higher planes who are helping you navigate this particular incarnation. But here's where it gets mysterious. At approximately 2:22 a.m., something unique occurs. Your astral body begins the process of re-entry. It moves back toward your physical form, carrying with it information, insights, and energies from the realms it has just visited. And sometimes that information is too intense, too foreign, too expansive for your waking mind to process. The jolt of awakening is actually the friction between dimensions. Imagine trying to fit an ocean into a teacup. That's what your consciousness is attempting when it returns from astral travel with high-frequency downloads and tries to compress them into the limited bandwidth of your waking awareness. Most of the time, the re-entry is smooth. You slip back into your body, and by morning you remember nothing. Maybe a fragment, a feeling, a color. But at 2:22 a.m., when the veil is thinnest and your nervous system is most receptive, the re-entry becomes conscious. You wake up mid-process, and sometimes you wake with things that don't make sense. Unexplained emotions, sudden grief for no reason, sudden joy, a sense of homesickness for a place you've never been, fragments of memories that feel impossible, conversations in languages you don't speak, faces you've never seen in this lifetime but somehow recognize. In one reading, Cayce described a young woman who woke at 2:14 a.m., sobbing uncontrollably. She had no trauma in her waking life, no recent loss. But in trance, Cayce revealed that her astral body had just visited a past life in which she had lost a child. The grief was not current, it was karmic, and it was surfacing for healing, not to torment her, but to release what had been trapped across incarnations. The awakening at 2:22 a.m. is your soul saying, I've just been somewhere profound. I've just learned something important, and I need you to wake up long enough to anchor this before it dissolves back into the unconscious. This is why forcing yourself back to sleep can feel like betrayal. Because it is. You're rejecting the very gift your higher self traveled dimensions to bring you. So the next time you wake at this hour and feel strange, foreign, or inexplicably emotional, don't pathologize it. Honor it. You've just returned from a journey most people will never consciously remember, and that alone makes you a traveler between worlds. Edgar Cayce called the pineal gland the master gland of spiritual vision. In ancient traditions, it was known as the third eye, the seat of the soul, the portal through which higher consciousness enters the body. Modern science has confirmed something remarkable. This tiny gland, no larger than a grain of rice, produces trace amounts of a molecule called dimethyltryptamine, DMT, during deep sleep. This is the same molecule found in sacred plant medicines used by indigenous cultures for thousands of years to induce mystical states, communicate with ancestors, and access dimensions beyond ordinary perception. Your brain is producing this molecule naturally, every single night. At 2:22 a.m., when pineal activity peaks and your brain waves shift from delta into theta, the liminal frequency between sleep and waking, you become a biological antenna, not for radio waves, not for Wi-Fi signals, but for transmissions from the intelligence Cayce called the universal mind, the field of infinite potential, the consciousness that holds all knowledge, all healing, all possibility. And sometimes, when the conditions are right, that intelligence downloads information directly into your awareness. Cayce gave hundreds of readings on this phenomenon. He described sudden awakenings where people would receive solutions to problems they'd been struggling with for years, creative breakthroughs, prophetic glimpses of events yet to come, instructions for healing themselves or others. And the transmission wouldn't come through words, it would come through knowing, a sudden clarity that arrived fully formed, as if it had always been there, just waiting for the noise to quiet enough to be heard. In one documented case, a scientist woke at 2:30 a.m. with the complete formula for a chemical compound he'd been trying to synthesize for months. He hadn't been dreaming about it. He hadn't been thinking about it before bed. It simply appeared in his mind, whole and accurate. When he tested it the next day, it worked. This is not luck. This is not coincidence. This is your pineal gland functioning as it was designed to, as a receiver for information that exists outside the limits of your personal memory, your education, your conscious mind. But here's what most people miss. The body wakes you at 2:22 a.m. because the download is too important to risk losing in the amnesia of morning. Your soul is trying to encode something into conscious memory before the ego re-engages and dismisses it as just a dream. So when you wake at this hour and you feel that strange sense of presence, that tingling behind your forehead, that quiet knowing that something just shifted, don't ignore it. Don't rationalize it away. Sit with it. Ask what's being shown to you, and if words don't come, simply place your hand over your heart and say, I'm listening, I'm ready, show me what I need to see. Because your pineal gland is not broken, your sleep is not disordered. You are being initiated into a way of knowing that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. And that makes you dangerous, not to others, but to every limiting belief you've ever been taught about who you are and what you're capable of receiving. Edgar Cayce's readings revealed something that most spiritual teachers don't talk about. Your soul carries time-coded memories, traumas, triumphs, deaths, awakenings, all stamped with the exact hour they occurred. And those timestamps don't disappear when you die. They follow you, across incarnations, across centuries. If you died at 2:22 a.m. in a previous life, your cellular memory may trigger automatic awakening at that exact time in this one. Cayce called this the karma clock, the soul's way of bringing unresolved energy back to consciousness at the precise moment it was originally imprinted, not to punish you, not to haunt you, but to give you the opportunity to heal what was left unfinished. In one reading given in 1932, Cayce described a woman who woke every night at 2:19 a.m. in a state of terror. Doctors found nothing wrong. Psychiatrists attributed it to anxiety. But in trance, Cayce saw a past life in France during the 1700s, where she had been accused of witchcraft and dragged from her bed at that exact hour to face execution. The trauma was not in her mind. It was in her soul's memory, and it was surfacing now because she was finally strong enough to release it. He gave her specific instructions. At 2:19 a.m., instead of fighting the fear, she was to sit up, light a candle, and speak directly to the memory. You are safe now. That was then. This is now. I release you with love. Within 2 weeks, the awakening stopped. The karmic loop closed. This is why these wake-ups often intensify before major life transitions, before you step into a new level of purpose, before you meet someone significant, before you leave a situation that no longer serves you. The old timeline is trying to complete itself. The soul is trying to clear the karma so you can move forward unencumbered. And 2:22 a.m. becomes the threshold, the moment when past and present collide, when who you were meets who you're becoming, when the unhealed wound finally gets the attention it's been crying out for across lifetimes. So if you've been waking at this hour, ask yourself, what was I afraid of? What did I lose? What did I leave unsaid? Not in this life necessarily, but in the life before, or the one before that. Because the pattern you're experiencing may not have started in this body. It may have started centuries ago. And it's returning now because you're finally ready to break the cycle. The hour is not your enemy, it's your liberator. And every time you wake, you're being given another chance to rewrite the ending. Edgar Cayce was adamant about one thing: the body speaks in symbols. Every sensation is a language. Every ache, every chill, every inexplicable surge of heat carries meaning. And when you wake at 2:22 a.m., your body is not waking randomly. It's delivering a message. The question is whether you know how to read it. Let's start with the heart. If you wake with your heart racing, pounding, as if you've just run a marathon, even though you've been lying still, this is not panic. This is activation. Cayce taught that the heart chakra is the bridge between the lower physical centers and the higher spiritual centers. When it's being activated, it can feel destabilizing, overwhelming, like your chest is too small to contain what's moving through it. This awakening signals one of two things: divine love is breaking through, or unresolved grief is surfacing for release. Both feel intense. Both require your attention. The way to discern which is this: divine love feels expansive, even if it's overwhelming. Grief feels constrictive, like your heart is clenching around something it doesn't want to let go of. Now, the third eye. If you wake with pressure between your eyebrows, a dull ache at the center of your forehead, or a sensation like something is pressing inward, this is clairvoyant opening. Your third eye is attempting to perceive beyond the physical. Cayce warned that this can be uncomfortable at first, because the energy center is literally stretching, expanding, preparing to receive visual information from non-physical realms. Do not be afraid of this. Place your fingers gently on the spot. Breathe and ask, what am I being shown? You may not see images immediately. You may simply feel a knowing, a certainty about something you couldn't have logically deduced. That is clairvoyance in its earliest form. Then there's the throat. Waking with tightness in your throat, difficulty swallowing, or a sensation like something is caught there. This is your body's way of saying you have something to say and you're not saying it. Cayce linked throat chakra blockages to unspoken truth. Apologies you're withholding. Boundaries you're afraid to set. Creative expression you're suppressing because you've been taught it's not valuable. The universe is waking you at 2:22 a.m. to tell you your voice matters, your truth matters, and the longer you silence it, the more your body will scream in its place. In one case, a man woke at this hour for 3 months straight with throat pain. He went to doctors. They found nothing. It wasn't until he finally told his family about a secret he'd been carrying for years that the awakenings stopped. The pain wasn't medical, it was vibrational, and it was waiting for him to speak what had been locked inside. And then there are the hands. If you wake with tingling, buzzing, or heat in your hands, you are a healer, whether you know it yet or not. Cayce taught that healing energy moves through the hands when the channel is open. And sometimes the soul wakes you at 2:22 a.m. to remind you of gifts you agreed to use in this lifetime, but have been too afraid, too busy, or too conditioned to access. Place your hands on your own body when this happens, on your heart, on your belly, on any place that hurts, and notice what happens. You may feel warmth. You may feel relief. That is not imagination. That is your soul remembering what it came here to do. Every body sensation is a sentence in a language you're being taught to read. And the more you pay attention, the clearer the messages become, until one day you don't just wake at 2:22 a.m., you wake fluent. Edgar Cayce often said that the departed and the angelic realm prefer to communicate during sleep, because your ego's filters are lowered, because your disbelief is temporarily suspended, because in the dream state you're already in a frequency closer to theirs. But sometimes the message is too urgent to wait for dream recall. Sometimes it needs to be delivered while you're conscious enough to remember it. And so they wake you, not with force, not with fear, but with presence. You might wake at 2:22 a.m. and feel that someone just left the room, that the air is different, thicker, warmer. You might catch a scent that has no source. Your grandmother's perfume, your father's aftershave, the smell of rain, even though the windows are closed. You might hear a sound, a whisper of your name, a sigh, a footstep. This is not your imagination playing tricks. This is contact. Cayce taught that each type of presence has what he called a frequency signature. The departed feel personal, intimate. They bring memories with them, emotions. You might suddenly remember something they said to you years ago, and it will be exactly the guidance you need in this moment. That is not coincidence. That is them using your own memory bank to communicate. Spirit guides, on the other hand, feel different, more neutral, more instructional. They don't come with the emotional weight of personal history. They come with clarity, direction, a sense of being gently steered towards something you're not yet seeing on your own. And angelic presence? That's unmistakable. Cayce described it as a frequency of pure love without agenda. When an angel is near, you don't feel judged. You don't feel analyzed. You feel held, seen, loved in a way that has no conditions, no expectations, no human complication. It's a feeling so rare in this world that when it happens, you know it's not coming from here. But here's the crucial part. How do you know it's real and not just wishful thinking? Cayce gave one simple test. Does it bring peace or does it bring fear? If you wake at 2:22 a.m. and feel a presence that calms you, even if it surprises you, it's benevolent. If you wake and feel dread, oppression, or something that makes your body contract, it's not. And we'll talk about that shadow side in a moment. But for now, know this. If you've lost someone and you keep waking at this hour with the sense that they're near, they probably are. Not to haunt you, not because they're stuck, but because love doesn't end at death. And sometimes the only way to reach you through the noise of grief is to meet you in the silence of 2:22 a.m. when your defenses are down and your heart is finally open enough to feel them one more time. So don't dismiss it. Don't rationalize it away. Just say, I feel you. Thank you for coming. I'm listening. And then notice what happens next, because the conversation doesn't end. It just shifts into a language most people have forgotten how to speak. Not all awakenings are benevolent. And Edgar Cayce was very clear about this. in our vulnerability at these hours, when the veil is thin and our defenses are lowered, we are not only open to higher frequencies, we are also exposed to lower ones. Cayce warned that there are entities, energies, and fragments of consciousness that exist in what he called the lower astral plane. These are not demons in the religious sense. They are not evil incarnate. They are simply beings or thought forms that vibrate at frequencies of fear, anger, deception, or confusion. And sometimes when you're learning to open spiritually, you encounter them. This is why some people wake at 2:22 a.m. feeling terror, why they experience sleep paralysis, why they sense a presence in the room that feels oppressive, heavy, malevolent. Let's be very clear. This is not a sign that you're cursed. It's not punishment. It's not proof that you're doing something wrong. It's a mirror. Cayce taught that these experiences almost always reflect unintegrated shadow aspects within ourselves, parts of us we've denied, suppressed, or refused to acknowledge. Rage we won't express, shame we won't confess, wounds we won't grieve. And when those parts can't get our attention during waking hours, they show up in the borderland, dressed as something external and terrifying. In one reading, a man described waking at 2:30 a.m. to a dark figure standing at the foot of his bed. Paralyzed, he couldn't move or scream. He was convinced he was being attacked by something demonic, but Cayce, in trance, told him something unexpected. The figure is your own fear, given form. It is showing you what you will not face within yourself. The man had been suppressing grief over his father's death for years, refusing to cry, refusing to acknowledge the pain, and his psyche, desperate to process it, created a visual representation of the darkness he was carrying but wouldn't name. Once he allowed himself to grieve, the figure never returned. But Cayce also acknowledged that there are times when protection is necessary, when an energy truly is external and needs to be cleared. His recommendations were simple and powerful. Before sleep, visualize white or golden light surrounding your entire body and your room. Speak aloud, even if it feels awkward. I am surrounded by the light of Christ consciousness. Only love may enter here. If you wake in fear, place your hand on your heart and repeat, I call upon the highest good. I release all that is not mine. I am protected. And if the experiences persist, if they escalate, seek support from a trusted spiritual mentor, an energy healer, or a mental health professional trained in spiritual emergence. There is no shame in needing help to navigate the borderland. Cayce himself worked with medical doctors and encouraged integration of physical, mental, and spiritual care. The shadow side is not the enemy. It's the teacher you didn't ask for but desperately need. Because once you face it, once you stop running, once you integrate what it's showing you, it loses its power, and the awakenings transform from terror into initiation, from nightmare into breakthrough. Fear is not a wall, it's a doorway, and on the other side is the version of you that no longer needs to be afraid. Here's the paradox that most spiritual seekers miss. Sometimes the spiritual solution requires honoring the physical body. Edgar Cayce gave hundreds of readings on sleep disturbances, and while many addressed the metaphysical causes, he was equally insistent on addressing the physiological ones, because you cannot receive clear spiritual transmission through a body that is toxic, depleted, or out of alignment. One of his most frequent recommendations was castor oil packs. Placed over the abdomen before bed, these packs calm the nervous system, improve lymphatic drainage, and create what Cayce called a state of receptivity. He taught that the liver and intestines, when congested, produce what he termed toxic dreams, distorted, fearful sleep experiences that are not spiritual messages but biochemical noise. By supporting detoxification, you clear the channel, and suddenly the dreams and awakenings become coherent, meaningful. Instead of chaos, you receive clarity. Cayce also emphasized spinal alignment. He linked the flow of cerebrospinal fluid to spiritual receptivity. In his words, the spine is the antennae through which the life force enters the body. If your spine is misaligned, compressed, or blocked, the transmission from higher consciousness cannot flow freely. He recommended regular spinal adjustments, gentle stretching before bed, and sleeping in positions that support natural curvature. For many people struggling with nocturnal awakenings, the root cause wasn't spiritual emergency. It was a pinched nerve or compressed vertebra disrupting the energetic flow. And then there was diet. Cayce was adamant, do not eat heavy proteins or fried foods within 3 hours of sleep. These create what he called cellular burden, forcing the body to spend the night digesting instead of regenerating. And when the body is in digestive distress, the soul cannot travel freely. Your astral body remains tethered to the physical, unable to access higher planes because all available energy is being diverted to your stomach. He recommended light, alkaline meals in the evening, fresh vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and always, gratitude before sleep. A simple prayer or acknowledgement of the day's blessings, not as religious obligation but as energetic reset. A way of telling your nervous system, you are safe, you are cared for, you can let go now. In one documented case, a woman who had been waking at 2:20 a.m. in distress for months made only 2 changes. She started using castor oil packs 3 nights a week, and she stopped eating after 7 p.m. Within 2 weeks, her sleep stabilized. The awakenings didn't stop completely, but they transformed. She no longer woke in fear. She woke in curiosity, in receptivity, ready to receive whatever her soul wanted to show her. This is the integration Cayce taught, honoring the body as the temple, not as an obstacle to transcendence, but as the very instrument through which transcendence becomes possible, because your soul chose this body, these cells, this nervous system, and part of your spiritual work is learning to care for it with the same reverence you would give to any sacred space. Only then does it become a clear channel for the divine. If you're watching this, there's a good chance your 2:22 a.m. awakenings haven't been random. They've been clustering, intensifying, happening more frequently right before something major shifts in your life. Edgar Cayce taught that this is not coincidence, this is initiation. In ancient mystery schools, initiates were deliberately sleep-deprived to thin the veil, to weaken the ego's defenses, to force the consciousness into liminal states where revelation becomes possible. The exhaustion wasn't cruelty, it was preparation, a way of breaking down the old identity so a new one could emerge. And your soul knows this. Right before you step into a new level of purpose, right before you meet someone who will change your trajectory, right before you leave a situation that has been slowly suffocating you, your soul begins the preparation process. It wakes you again and again, not to torment you, but to ready you, because transformation is not gentle, it's not convenient. And the part of you that has been running your life until now, the part that values comfort, predictability, control, that part will resist with everything it has. The 2:22 a.m. awakenings are your higher self overriding that resistance. They are mini-deaths, small dissolutions of the identity you've been clinging to, and every time you wake, you're being asked, are you ready to let go? Are you ready to become who you actually are instead of who you've been pretending to be? In one reading, Cayce described a man who experienced months of nocturnal awakenings before finally leaving a career that was killing his soul. He was exhausted, frustrated, convinced something was wrong with him. But Cayce explained, the soul is preparing the vessel. What is coming cannot fit into who you have been. And he was right. Within 6 months of the career change, the man's entire life restructured. Relationships that were superficial fell away. Opportunities he never imagined became available. And the awakenings? They stopped, because the initiation was complete. This is why fighting the pattern only prolongs it. Your resistance is the last defense of an old identity that knows it's about to die. And the more you cling, the more intense the wake-ups become, until finally you surrender. You stop asking why this is happening and start asking what it's preparing you for. That shift in question changes everything, because suddenly you're no longer the victim of your insomnia. You're the initiate in your own mystery school. And every 2:22 a.m. is another lesson, another revelation, another step closer to the version of yourself you came here to become. The exhaustion you're feeling is not failure. It's the labor before birth. And what's being born is you, the real you, the one your soul always knew was possible. If you're watching this because someone you love keeps waking at 2:22 a.m., someone who seems distant, anxious, changed, this section is for you.